Fulham boys, we're on a bender. The Jack and Joe show is back. We're into the month of November. Joe Sansom, not only on YouTube, but we're on the podcast feed this weekend because we play Monday Night Football against Bus Stop in Hounslow, against Brentford. How are you feeling and how are you?
Very good and very up for it as well. We were just speaking off camera and there's been a lot of debate, as there always is when we play Brentford, about the fans that care about this more, the fans that care about this less. I do think that it's normally derived directly from when you became a Fulham fan, what your age is, and were we playing Brentford during those years. For me and you, Jax, similar age, we didn't play them until about 2014. So I remember going to that League Cup game at Ellen Road. I wasn't there. I've never gone to Ellen Road for the League Cup game. We were there at Brentford and we were there at Griffin Park. And I remember that the atmosphere surprised me from both sets of fans in terms of how up for it everyone was in a good way. And I am really hoping that there's more of the same on Monday night. I'm so glad that it's a night game. Friday night would have been ideal, but a Monday night, I won't make too many qualms about that. Under the lights, loads of fun. Everyone after work, have a few drinks. Always a better atmosphere at Craven Cottage when it's a night game as well. And when it's a derby, I am getting shades of that Chelsea game a few years ago. Not the one from last year, but the one from 2 years ago.
That was a Thursday night, of course.
It was, yeah.
You've made a point on Twitter this week, and I think that, for me, it's when Joe Sansom tweets, we all listen, because you don't tweet as regularly as I do.
Yeah.
But you speak probably more sense than I do from time to time.
Up for debate severely.
But the point you made was that you want the Hammersmith end standing all game, and we've done this before when we played Chelsea, when we played big games, playoff semi-finals and stuff like that. And it does make a huge difference. I don't necessarily think that every single person in the Hammersmith can stand for 90 minutes just due to age and if disability or whatever. But it does make a huge difference. And I'm guessing now we're on this platform. Now we're speaking to a listener or someone who's watching. Would you like to double down on that point and say why it's important ahead of the game on Monday?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, the point you make is very true, is that I'm sure that when I first say this, there will be half people going, yeah, that's a great idea, and half the people going, I don't want to stand. Yeah. And I've got my season ticket. And I suppose this is the big difference in a league game than it would be for the Liverpool semi-final last year, when you could keep your season ticket, but you could also pick a new seat. The same for the Derby playoff semi-final a few years ago as well. But you cannot argue that the atmospheres in those games, in particular Derby, I feel like Liverpool slightly different just because of the pre-match build-up was insane in terms of the atmosphere and the ground. The build-up was great, and obviously the Luis Diaz goal sort of killed it a little bit. You never know what would have happened if we'd have scored first, but the Derby game is the best atmosphere I've seen at Craven Cottage ever, and I guarantee it would not have been that way were we sat down, essentially. It just gets everyone more naturally up for it. The noise just increases. People are on their feet already. It's not these sort of up and down, which is a bit fun, when we're attacking the Hammersmith end and you're not sat in the middle of blocks H4, H5. I'm over in H7. And I know there's some people around me that maybe perhaps wouldn't stand up, but what you could do is they can go on the end of the row, for example. They go on the end, their view is not obstructed. It's just one of these things where I think we need to get behind the team for a game like this. Some people will say, this game doesn't matter to me. Well, it matters to me, and it matters to a lot of fans. And I said to you before we started filming, does it matter to me as much as playing Chelsea? Nowhere near. I have to be honest. Does it matter to me more than the other 17 teams when you take out Chelsea and you take out ourselves and you take out Brentford? Absolutely. It does. So I think that we need to do something. I'd love the club to do something that isn't clappers, but I think they've made some good progress this season in encouraging more people to wave the flags before kickoff. In even the pyrotechnics, let's face it, they're a bit fun. More people are going into the Riverside stand bit by bit. There was a little bit of back and forth in the Aston Villa game coming from the Riverside end, I noticed. Very slight, but it's an improvement. And it would just be great to make this game as uncomfortable for Brentford as possible, because we've not got a good record against them, Jack. And 3 points would be huge for the club, for the fan base, for righting those wrongs of previous years. And I just strongly believe that as fans being in the game, you can do your bit, and that's one of the ways that I would suggest in the comments. Let me know what you think. If you disagree, tell me why. This is obviously not a foolproof idea, but I do definitely think that it's something that if people got behind it, you could be, for lack of a better phrase, the 12th man, and really help to bring a better result. Because if you think of games that when you go to hostile away grounds and momentum swings in football, this is almost a way of gaining that momentum from the first whistle if the crowd's up for it. Because as loud as the Brentford fans might be, 3,000 of them, you cannot compare that to the other 25,000 or however many it is if they actually got up for it. So it's something that I would love to see implemented.
You're correct, and I've rarely sort of sat through a 90-minute game been at the Cottage where I thought, not rarely, it doesn't happen often, where I think the Cottage is rocking, like genuinely rocking. Like I remember the opening day against Liverpool, the 2-2 draw, the semi-final against Liverpool, Reading. One that sticks out for me, and I've definitely mentioned this before, and I think it was just because of my timing of arriving to the ground, and then basically the game just kicked off and we'd scored within 2 minutes. It was such a long time ago. 4-0 win over QPR was genuinely one of the best atmospheres I've ever been at a game at the Cottage for a long time. And we have, and I've said this before, like we have the capability of turning up as fans. I know obviously I'm in the press box, but I would do the same if I was in the Hammersmith end, and just making a racket and making it uncomfortable and making it a cauldron. Because, or even that Bournemouth game on the Friday night, remember the big build up to the Parker game, and the atmosphere was great. And obviously we got the 1-1 draw, but even I just remember that, was it Tosin who scored? He was like sucking the ball in because it was like we'd put so many men forward, and the limbs when that goal went in, I like genuinely lost like my bearings there. Like, and it happens. The top of the Hammersmith will always turn up, but it's just about the wider stadium now. Johnny Haynes, Riverside. I mean, even what was it, the game the other day against Villa? There was like a block of about 20 people in the Riverside who were just in the upper tier, standing up and singing, and that's great to see. And because it's a smaller sort of section of fans, some people might look at that and go, "That's really tin pot." No, they're trying to create an atmosphere. They're trying to do what Fulham have lacked over recent years, which is generate an atmosphere at every single game. Like I say, we very rarely sort of. I don't think any Newcastle fan or Villa fan or West Ham fan would have come out of the Cottage this season and been like, "Wow, that was intimidating," because it just isn't. And that's not me having a go at the fans. That's just who Fulham are as a club. But when we have played those big games, it's been very, very, very good. And it actually does sort of make you look around and go, "God, my ears are actually kind of ringing here." And when I first went to Fulham, a game against Everton, 2-0, I sat in the Johnny Haynes and I started crying because it was too loud. I'm guessing it wasn't that loud. It was just me being a sensitive 6-year-old kid. I just wanted to talk about Brentford because you reminded me of like past experiences. I know we're playing at home, but Griffin Park was such a mixed sort of experience. I mean, there was that one game where we beat them in the League Cup. That was really fun. First time to Griffin Park, and I thought, oh God, new rivalry. This is great. There was one time where we were 3-0 down at half time singing "You're Not Fit to Wear the Shirt."
That was awful.
Awful. We've lost, I think we lost 2-1, Jota in the last minute, that goal. Like 1-0. Oh, no. Cabano scored, then we lost 2-1. We lost 1-0 one season. We beat them 2-0 and this is all at Griffin Park with Tom Kenny scoring in the last minute to seal it. One of the best nights of my Fulham supporting life, really, that one. But the point I wanted to make was that, like I said this on my own channel yesterday, that the last 4 times we played Brentford, home and away in the Premier League, just hasn't really been like a time in the season where like you get really up for it. We played them second game of the season last season, first home game. Maybe you get up for it, but it wasn't as like cauldrony, or like it was a 3 p.m. on Saturday. Away from home last season was third to last game of the season, 0-0 draw, genuinely one of the worst games I've ever seen. And then the season before that was the third game of the season at home, where we obviously won. That was a great atmosphere. That was good. But even like the away game was the Monday Night Football, where both teams were sort of surviving, and we obviously lost the game, but we were in a position where nothing really was on the game, nothing really mattered. But what I will say is that like this game is the first time where I thought okay, we're both sitting pretty in the table, and I feel like there is something on this. We could overtake them. They could get points clear of us and move up further in the table towards the 8th and the 7th, and we could do the same if we won. So there is something on this game where both teams, it's not like we're languishing down in 18th and 19th, and that would obviously still make it a big game. But there's whoever wins this could be the best of the rest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is basically a judge of who can push on, and winning at Goodison Park for the day. That would have been a good way of doing that, but ultimately, I'd rather do it in a local derby. We've been very good at home. Aston Villa aside, and let's face it, against Aston Villa, there was still some good things, and we still could have come away with something had certain key moments of the match gone our way, both from going forward with the penalty, a couple of misses, but also defensively and the red card. I'm really excited for this one because I'm hoping that this can be our night, our day to push on. But there are things about Brentford that do make me very nervous. Let's take all bias out of the equation, all chance that have maybe been referenced already out of the equation. Thomas Frank is a very good manager. Mm-hmm. And what he's done with Brentford has been fantastic and could be likened to what Silva has done at Fulham in terms of taking a team who were not at the level to a Premier League ready team, and then establishing them instantly. And they've been up 1 year more than we have in this current spell. I would say that we've nearly overtaken them now in terms of who is more secure. They've been secure, obviously, for a season longer, but I think that our squad is better. I think that our manager is better. I do think Thomas Frank's very good, though. See why he gets picked for some of the bigger jobs like the United one, which, thank goodness, looks like is going to another Portuguese manager. I really do fear a few of their players, not all. And Mbeumo, speaks for himself. So does Wissa, who obviously maybe him coming back into form at not the ideal time. A player that I fear for a different reason, just because of football script, is Fabio Carvalho. I saw a few people, and I mentioned this offline as well, saying about, is he going to get booed? Well, you know what, do what you like individually. But I personally booed him when he came back in August 2022, playing for Liverpool, because I didn't like how he'd left then. So personally, yes, if you don't feel like you want to, then completely fine. I'm not going to be bothered about it. I don't think anyone will. But what I would say is he is a player that knows what he has done. He knew about the Brentford rivalry and he has gone there. And if you're someone that doesn't care too much about the rivalry of Brentford, you probably don't care. If you're someone who, like me, does have feeling in this game and wants to get the better of them, then I'm sure it will rub you up the wrong way. So there's players that I do fear, but I think we have to look at them defensively, Jack, and think about some of the games they have won. They've won 4 games this season. That's more than we have. They have beaten the current bottom 4 at home in those games. They've conceded 3 goals twice, and they've also let one into both Palace and Southampton. They still haven't kept a clean sheet. They are now the only club whose goalkeeper has started every single game who hasn't kept a clean sheet yet this season. So that's 9 games, no clean sheets. And ultimately, he's been up for a lot of flack again as Flecken. He won them the game midweek, but to be honest, he's partly at fault for why they went to penalties in the first place, because he was beaten from long range again. So I think that if we get the first goal here, we can really put pressure on them. They have some very good players, and some of those are defensively, but as a unit, I don't think they've been anywhere near the Brentford that we're used to seeing, where it's been very solid, hard to beat. There's been a lot of high-scoring games, the 5-3 against Wolves, the 4-3 crazy game against Ipswich, where Ipswich, with 10 men, nearly equalised in the 97th minute with Liam Delap. So on another day, that's drop points. It was a goalkeeper error from Muric that got them the win in the end from Mbeumo's cross-come shot. So there's a lot of positives I think we can take from what Brentford have done this season. I think they've looked good. I don't think they've looked great. And I think that the wins have come against poor opposition. I would argue that our performances overall have been better. And I would really hope that we can show that on Monday night.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If we talk about the performance, I mean, Everton feels like completely old news now, but the performance was good. It's just a massive shame that we can't add a second in that game, and that would have been a worthy 3 points. Marco Silva spoke after the game about he was just puzzled as to how we didn't win that game, and it's very, very frustrating for him, for the players. But it just felt as if I don't think that happens if we're at any of the other non-top 6 grounds. I think we hold on for 1-0. I think Goodison has something about it where it's just like, even at their worst, they still manage to find a way to score. And I just couldn't quite. I sort of 6 added minutes. I was like, and then Beto had that header on target, and I was like, right, that could be that, and so that could be the chance, and we still managed to find a way to concede. I obviously I'm over it now, but we haven't really spoke about it much. But do you think, and this is definitely a question for Marco later as well in the press conference, do you think that Danny Ings goal, that the Beto goal, we're playing on the mind of the players, that we're conceding late goals and we only lead by a goal margin when we've been the better team in the game? Is it a psychological problem? Is there something that we need to fix in that area to secure those 3 points? If we add those extra 4 points, no one would bat an eye. Everyone would be like, yeah, Fulham, and they deserve to be where they are. It's almost like, do you remember how many times we spoke about the Scott Parker era?
Yeah.
Where the performances were so good, but we didn't have the points to back it up in the Premier League. And it feels not quite the same because he's a better manager still, and these are circumstances where we've conceded late on in games, but it feels like that as well. Like Fulham should be sitting in like 7th, 6th in the table right now, and there would be no qualms about that whatsoever, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, if you like XG or not, it's a stat that can be useful for these sorts of things. We'd be second in the league if games that were decided by XG in terms of how many good chances you're creating versus conceding. Part of that is because we created more against Man City, so that would have been a win. Obviously, the West Ham and Everton games would have been wins as well. I think our only defeat would have been United, because we had even chances to Villa when you take into account the penalty. Massively frustrating. I think it is a psychological thing, and we've had it over a number of years, and we've tried different things to fix it. And I saw a bit of debate this week about the 5 at the back, which I wanted to sort of chime in on, because I don't really agree with the negativity about going to 5 at the back. And the reason for that is because we didn't do it against West Ham and we conceded. And I'm not saying that is or isn't to do with 5 at the back, but it's just a fact. We didn't go to 5 at the back. We didn't bring on the extra defender. So the next week, twice in a row against Newcastle and against Nottingham Forest, with about 10 minutes left, we switched to 5 at the back. And once we made that change, we conceded no major chances. We then done it for a third time, and we've conceded 1 major chance over 3 games. Went down to 1-0 in the final few minutes with 5 at the back. And
it's like recency bias.
Yeah, it's recency bias. And also the reason that we can see that goal is not because Cuenca came on, because the gap that was taken by Iwobi is not the reason we conceded that goal. In all honesty, it was Reece Nelson's man at the back post, and he's not a defensive player. He switched off. Ashley Young's lost. It's a very good cross. He shouldn't have been unmarked, but I don't think that you can argue sometimes with it where the cross comes in. Tete could have stopped the cross. There's so many micro moments where if Tete blocks that cross, for example, which would have been hard to do, but let's just say that he did, everyone's going, oh, haven't we been brilliant since we've gone down to 5 at the back? It's
exactly
one tiny moment. So if it becomes a regular theme, which I really hope it doesn't, then I completely think it's fair. But I'm more frustrated about the psychological aspect of us always dropping off. And I don't equate going with the 5 at the back to dropping off, because when we played against Newcastle, we just changed the style slightly. We still were dominating the ball. We were playing slightly more on the counter-attack. And I would have loved to have seen us do that at Goodison. But ultimately, by the time Cuenca came on and Muniz came on for Jimenez and Iwobi, I think there was 4 minutes left. And in that time, they've had 1 real effort. And it just so happens that it was the chance. And, sometimes that happens. The West Ham one annoyed me more because of how avoidable the goal was.
It wasn't a throw-in.
Well, for a start, it wasn't their throw. Everyone then switches off regardless, and then I think Leno should have saved it as well. This one was just, they had 1 moment of quality, which is frustrating. I think that goal still happens if we have 4 at the back, because ultimately it wasn't Robinson's man. it was Nelson or whoever is on that left wings man in Ashley Young, because they doubled up. So yeah, frustrating. If we are playing against Brentford and we are 1 goal up with 5 minutes left, and let's just say they are slightly growing into the game, it's on them. Personally, I would want to go to 5 at the back.
You'd be happy with that, yeah?
I would be happy with that if it happened right now. When seeing the game, things might be a bit different. You don't know who's already come on, who's waiting on the bench, who's tired, who's doing well, who's not doing as well. But on paper, I would say that would be. I think it would increase your chances of winning the game by having more people in the box. I think that often a lot of our issues come from the midfield in front, and I've seen we've got players like Sander Berger and Harrison Reed who, yes, they can do a defensive job, but ultimately, are they going to relieve any pressure? Are they just going to be the ones that are almost preventing additional pressure? But when you get the ball, you have no outlet because Moon has just come on, a couple of minutes. I'd have probably kept Jimenez on, in all honesty. I would actually argue that was maybe the change that annoyed me more because, a couple of minutes, what's Moon is going to do? He's not fresh. His first touch got a little bit ropey. Jimenez had a fantastic game, didn't look too exhausted. So I get the argument, but I just think that the game management from the players on the pitch was the bigger problem rather than the formation of those players.
Yeah, it felt like the only time we were trying to run down the clock was when Leno had the ball in his hands, and I think that again that was a lesson we haven't learnt from the West Ham game. It was definitely evident that we were not running down the clock efficiently, and we gave the ball away in stupid areas. And obviously they go on to score. One thing that did annoy me about that was that someone, I can't remember who, someone basically said that was Diop's fault that we conceded, and I was like, how? Everyone else is in the box as well. I think Diop's obviously closest to Beto at the time. I actually thought that Diop had an outstandingly good game for someone. And okay, it helps that Everton didn't press us and we were allowed to have the ball, and that's why Sander Berger had much more of a comfortable game as well. But I think that when Anderson, and hopefully he doesn't get suspended or injured or anything, when he's out of the team, I'm actually pretty happy for Diop to come in. There are obviously some worries about him on the ball sometimes, but again, like I say, he wasn't being pressed, and maybe that's something that Everton should have done more, because I think that Diop can be nervy to watch on the ball at times. We saw that at was that Ipswich? Was it Ipswich? Yeah, that was yeah. But you mentioned Reece Nelson.
Yeah.
He's a player on everyone's lips at the moment because Marco said it last week when I asked him, is he close to a start? And he said he's close. And I genuinely think he might start on Monday. What do you think? And let's talk about the team. Let's talk about how we think we're going to line up and how we think the game's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, when I mentioned Nelson there about from a defensive point of view, that's not the player that we brought him in to be. He was great on the bench again, and I would love him to start. And so the team that I'd probably go with is, Leno in goal, back to the normal back four in terms of Anderson coming back in. I feel a little bit bad for Diop, but Anderson, I want his passing range back in the team, leadership qualities as well. But Diop played very well. Sander Berger, I think, keeps his place. We know Lukic is seemingly not close enough to being back yet. Sounds like might be one for after the Crystal Palace game, the international break, when we play Wolves at home potentially, or around that period anyway. Once again, although I thought he was better, I didn't see enough from Pereira to warrant keeping him in the team. Do I think he'll stay in the team? Yeah, absolutely. I can't see a world in which he gets dropped. But if this was my team, I would have, there's a couple of different options, but I'd probably like to see Iwobi centrally and Smith Rowe and go for it. And that would open up a space on that left wing for Reece Nelson with Adama on the right and Jimenez up front. I wouldn't be opposed, for example, if Pereira kept his place and Iwobi stayed on the left. I would be very much inclined to start Nelson ahead of Adama for this one and bring him off the bench. I feel that there's sort of been a passing of the torch over the last couple of games in terms of who's providing more when they're on the pitch. And I think that it has been Nelson, but by a long shot in the last few performances. I think that he can play on either side as well. So, it's up for debate where he plays, but I would be very inclined to see that. But yeah, if it's up to me, I'd drop Pereira and I'd drop Adama for this one. And obviously the change of Diop to Anderson. So 3 changes for me.
Interesting. I watched Iwobi's performance very closely on Saturday because he was sort of doing both. Because Robinson was really high up on the left, and he was sort of occupying that left-hand side as well alongside Robinson, but also would come inside and play more centrally. And that's obviously where we both feel where Iwobi can thrive. And of course, the goal comes from Iwobi being in a sort of central area, picking the ball up from Smith Rowe. What an assist. Oh my goodness. Genuinely, that is what I expected to see from Smith Rowe when we signed him.
Driving with the ball. Yeah, quality on the ball. Yeah.
And I'm glad, because the fans were getting frustrated. There was that corner in where he touched it and gave the ball away. Couldn't believe it. And so that really has, we know the quality that Smith Rowe's got. I was literally watching Bukayo Saka's 50 Premier League goals this week, and Smith Rowe in a couple of those was just magnificent on the ball, and that really reminded me of the assist he got on Saturday. I agree with you. I think that having a player like Adama Traore off the bench, who is known previously for coming off the bench and making an impact, does still benefit us. If Reece Nelson played from the start, it's two incredibly dangerous players who can add different things to their game or to the game. Adam can come on and stretch the defence with 20 minutes to go, and that's obviously one of the worst sights in football for a defender who is starting to get a little bit tired. Nelson's dribbling abilities, his speed, it's been very, very impressive against Everton. He probably should have done better in his decision making when it came to those areas. There was a ball across the face of goal, which was pretty dangerous, but there were passes on. One thing that annoyed me was when they equalised, Sander Berge held onto that ball for way too long.
When he cut inside.
Yeah, I was like, just pass it and just put it in. But I'm excited. I think will be one change though. I think it'll be Anderson in for Diop, and that'll be the team.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a prediction, I'm predicting a high scoring game because they've been scoring for fun, and we've been decent as well in front of goal. So I think we're going to win. I've got a good feeling about this, which makes me nervous. I'm touching wood right now, Christopher, but I'm a bit nervous as always. As I am for literally any game, regardless of its importance, to be honest, like when it's a dead rubber. I think we're going to win this one 3-2.
Wow.
And I think it's going to be a really good atmosphere. It's going to remind me a little bit of that game that you mentioned earlier when we first came back up and Mitrovic scored the last minute goal. Topsy-turvy, that one, I think we actually went 2 goals up. So I hope it doesn't happen like that. But that's sort of the game I'm expecting. To and fro, 2 pretty decent attacking teams, good atmosphere, under the lights and high scoring.
Oh, it'd be a great way to win. Obviously, conceding 2 is not great, but scoring 3 means we win the game. I should just correct myself and say that I think there'll be 2 changes. I think Nelson will actually come in for Adama, and Anderson comes in for Diop. I'm going to go 2-1, slightly to Fulham, slightly less.
Any win I'll take.
Yeah, literally. I think that. 18 goals scored, 18 goals conceded, an average of 2 goals scored a game and 2 goals conceded a game for Brentford. The trend obviously could continue, and a 3-2 result would basically reflect that, even if they end up losing. I mean, they are yet to win away from home this season, but I mean, that's ridiculous. Playing United, City, Liverpool, and Spurs, it's brutal. And in 3 of those games, they've taken the lead. And obviously, we know about the way they start fast. I'm wary of who wins the toss. I said this, yesterday, that if Brentford would win the toss and get the kickoff, I'd feel nervous. And obviously they'll kick off the second half if we win the toss in the first half. But you have to be wary that they have no fear when it comes to kicking off. They just flood men forward and see what they can create, whether it be from a first or second phase. So that's something to look out for. I do think, though, if we get Pereira on the ball, we get Smith Rowe on the ball, we link up with Iwobi and Robinson down the left-hand side, I think we're correct. And Jimenez had such a good game against Everton, holding up the ball, chances created, like genuinely looks, I wouldn't say Mitrovic-esque, but he looks like every time he's going to get a chance, it's going to be a good chance. He's not wasting opportunities like we've seen before from Muniz or Vinicius. And I obviously want to see Muniz play more, but he just can't right now because Jimenez is just in really, really good form. Which is why, Sammy made the point, losing to Preston was a really, really frustrating result for us because it doesn't allow us to see a second striker get some more minutes. But if we'd have played Arsenal we'd have played Arsenal on Wednesday or Tuesday, I don't necessarily think we get through, but that extra game would have been really good. Although, Brentford played in the week, we didn't. We've got extra time to rest as well. So, the seesaw effect of football there's an advantage and disadvantages on both sides. So
it's worth pointing out that they went strong midweek as well. They played a lot of their big hitters, and yes, they didn't go to extra time because I don't have that now, but full 90 minutes that we didn't have.
Exactly, and that's always a good thing. Joe, I think that might be that for today. It's been a really interesting chat, focusing on just the game. I know we looked back at Everton a little bit, but I think that's old news now, and we need to look forward. It is frustrating that after Palace, we have yet another international break, but this is a run of fixtures where, okay, we drew to Everton, now it's Brentford, then it's Palace, then it's Wolves, and then we play Spurs. Yeah. So these next three, really, we need to get the points that we basically have deserved already this season. I don't necessarily think we'll get 9, but I think we could get 7.
Yeah. It's we've got a tough run on paper after that. And like you said, don't fear any of these games individually. We think we can take on anyone, but in a row, it's rough. Brighton at home sort of sandwiches a couple of them. It's in the middle. It's a filling of the sandwich, but we've got a good record.
After the Spurs game.
After the Spurs game, before we play Arsenal and before we play Liverpool. I back us to pick up points, but yeah, it would be great to go into that tougher run with a bit of confidence that we can take on these teams, because Spurs, they have wobbly moments every week. Brighton definitely capable of picking up 3 points there. Arsenal have shown weakness, and even though they've shown less of it so far, so have Liverpool. So just nothing but confidence that we can go into that in a good vein of form.
It all starts on Monday, though. We've got to put in a good performance. And of course, we didn't score against either Brentford or Chelsea last season. So just to get a goal would be fantastic, wouldn't it, Joe?
Yeah, that is just ridiculous, by the way. 4 games. Yeah. It's crazy.
I think that's a point I want to make to Silver today, in terms of these games mean a lot. The fact we didn't score last season, obviously we tried, but we just didn't. And I just think and that's what it is. There hasn't been much bite in these games against Chelsea and Brentford for the last few years, because we either failed to score or they're played at really stupid times in the season. Okay, I'm talking more Brentford than Chelsea, because last season at the Bridge, I just remember being well up for it, and I think the same will be on Boxing Day. But in terms of the Brentford games, it's just been played at very bizarre times in the season where nothing much is riding on it, and I think this is the first time in for ages where we've actually played Brentford even in lockdown. We played them in the Carabao Cup and we lost 3-0, and John Mikel Seri missed a huge opportunity which still lives rent-free in my head. But yeah, looking forward to the game on Monday. We're both predicting a Fulham win, and I have to say, Joe, thanks so much for being here, and thanks so much for chatting Fulham Brentford.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks everyone for watching. Enjoy the game on Monday wherever you're watching it, and let's get behind the team.
Thanks, guys, for watching. Thank you for listening. If you have it in your ears today on the podcast feed, we're very happy to be back on the podcast feed. Guys, make an atmosphere. Get up for it. Whether you're drinking, you're not drinking. If you can stand, do stand. And try and make it a difficult place to come for Brentford. And if you want to boo Carvalho, boo Carvalho. I'm sure that the fact he plays for Brentford, the fact he's basically taken there's like this full circle step in his career where he's basically ended up at a club. I would say that Fulham and Brentford right now are on par with each other in terms of ambition and quality of team. Maybe Fulham just a little bit better, but I feel like he has just made this very weird sort of route, and that's just down to bad decision making from people around him or for him personally. Anyway, we could have spoke about that more in the show, but let's call it a day. Thanks so much for watching. And, a big old derby at Craven Cottage. Get up for it and come on, Fulham.